This week, Parshat Tisa Yitzi. Parshat Tisa is about Chet HaEgel, but we discussed the Psukim just before Chet HaEgel, the very famous Psukim of Veshamru Bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, La'asot et Shabbat, the Dorotam, the Psukim we say every single Shabbos at least once, because we saw something very, very interesting about these Psukim when looking inside the Torah.
And we notice the language of the pasuk isn't a classic commandment as we would expect, and those commandments already showed up a pasuk before. But we also notice something very interesting about where this shows up, what happens before, what happens after, and this seems to shine a different light on what the importance and meaning of these Psukim of Shabbos are.
Exactly, because many times when we think about the mitzvah of Zachor and the mitzvah of Shamor of Shabbos, we think about Zachor is the active mitzvahs of doing active deeds, doing active commandments, and the Shamor is more of the preventing yourself, the lo ta'aseh of Shabbos. However, over here we saw that the Psukim of Veshamru Bnei Yisrael Shabbat is something totally different than refraining yourself. That's not what it's talking about over here. So make sure you take a look. Hope you enjoy it. Let's go. Happy Motzei Purim! Parashat Tisa, Parashat Parah. This means we are really officially getting ready for Pesach now. This year, what I want to talk about in this week's Parasha is some very, very famous Psukim. The Psukim of Veshamru Bnei Yisrael Shabbat. We say them every Shabbos, at least once. At least once we say them on Shabbos. And what's actually very interesting, because when you look in the Torah, these Psukim, you will notice something extremely interesting, that these Psukim themselves are actually repeating a few other Psukim that came just before them. Because we see in this week's Parasha, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu finishes to command Moshe about building the Mishkan, then the Torah also tells us about Betzalel ben Uri, who was in charge of building the Mishkan. And then just before Chet HaEgel, we have these Psukim where HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands Moshe to keep Shabbos and don't let the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan, interfere with Shabbos. You have to keep Shabbos. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Achet Shabtatai Tishmo, you have to keep my Shabbos. Why? Ki oti, this is a brit, this is a covenant, this is a bond between me and Am Yisrael. This is what Shabbos is. And then after stating this, the Torah continues to Veshamru Bnei Yisrael Shabbat. And these Psukim that we say every Shabbos are actually repeating the Psukim just before. So first of all, why is it repeating? Why do we have so many Psukim, so many words saying the exact same thing? We have at least 3 times the concept of a covenant, of a brit, of a note mentioned in these Psukim. But even more so, what does it actually mean, Veshamru Bnei Yisrael Shabbat? Is it a statement? Is it a prediction for the future? Am Yisrael will keep the Shabbos. What does it mean? What is the Torah actually saying here? What is the meaning behind these very famous Psukim?
You know, actually, when looking at these Psukim, there's something that caught my eye even before the Veshamru and the Shabbos, is the context, is where it shows up. Because as you said, it shows up at the end of the Mishkan, and we always remember that you know, we have the Mishkan, and then we stop working in the Mishkan because we have Shabbos. And we have other places where the Mishkan and Shabbos come together, like in next Parsha in Vayakel. But when we actually look at the Psukim, we'll notice something fascinating. Shabbos is actually not part of the story of the Mishkan. It's actually part of the next stage, because between the Mishkan and talking about the Mishkan, there's a right? There's a large separation, and then we begin Shabbos, and then there's a short separation, followed immediately by Chet HaEgel. Meaning Shabbos is more linked to the next part, to Chet HaEgel, than to the previous part, to the Mishkan. And I think that when we look at this through that lens, we'll notice something fascinating and how unique these Psukim about Shabbos are. We have many Psukim about Shabbos, and many of them focus on different aspects of Shabbos. But I think there's an aspect here that you can't miss. It repeats itself over and over and over. And the key word is Shamor, lishmor, to guard, to protect, to save, to hold on to. Achet Shabtotai Tishmo, ushmartem et Shabbat. Veshamru Bnei Yisrael, the word, and we see other words about Shabbos in different places, Zachor, etc. But here it's lishmor, Veshamru, lishmor, shamartem. What is the meaning of this lishmor, and why is it so important here just before we step into Chet HaEgel? And I think in our mind, because we have Zachor and Shamor, and we remember Zachor as the active side of Shabbos, of bringing Shabbos, of Kiddush, and Shamor represents refraining from things, the melacha, not doing melacha. That's how it is in our mind. We have the positive aspect of Shabbos and the melacha, not doing melacha. That's the Zachor and that's the Shamor. But actually when we read the Psukim here, Shamor doesn't seem passive at all. More than that, the Pasuk says, Veshamru Bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat. La'asot is to do the Shabbat. How will you do the Shabbos? Actively by lishmor. So shmirah seems like something active. What does shmirah actually mean? And I think to truly understand all of this, we have to look at the deeper level of what's going on here. And I think there are two levels. One is, first of all of the Psukim here, repeating over and over this concept of eternity, of lidorotam, of this covenant, as you said, of this relationship between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch. And I think the term of lishmor is about keeping in touch, is about holding on to that relationship, not letting go of that relationship. Yes, sometimes that's expressed by not doing certain other things which contradict that relationship, but it's a lot more than that. It's an active thing. It's constantly looking how I can hold on and never let go of that relationship. Why is this so important here? Because we're just before a moment where it seems everything's about to fall apart. And just before it all seems to fall apart, HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts here a manual of how to avoid it and how to hold on to everything for eternity. But more than that, also a promise. Because I think that the words Veshamru, as you said, they're not needed here. We spoke about what we need to do. We were commanded. We know what to do. We know why to do it. It's all there already. So what is this pasuk in third person, Veshamru Bnei Yisrael, as if we zoomed out and are talking? It's not a commandment. And this is why these are the psukim we say every week. It's a promise. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, yeah, you're going to see everything fall apart. Maybe telling this to Moshe, maybe telling this to us. I know it's going to look awful. Things are going to seem like they've totally fallen apart, like we've lost that relationship, like, it's over. No, it isn't. Veshamru Bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat lidorotam. Listen how many words are eternity here. Lidorotam, brit olam, right? Eternity, lidorot for generation. Oti beini uvenechem. It's all about there's a bond between us that's deeper and stronger from all the challenges that are about to come upon us. Don't worry, that bond is stronger and will hold out. This isn't another commandment. This is already far more than that. But I think there's also another level. I think this is also, as I said, the manual. It's the cure of how to avoid Chet HaEgel, how to come out of Chet HaEgel. Because what is the concept of shmirah? We think shmirah, as we said, is passive. La'asot, doing, is the opposite of lishmor. And the Torah is saying, no, it isn't. You think that you constantly need to do the next thing. Something's not happening, so you have to do something else, and you're constantly running from one thing to the other. That's exactly what's about to happen to Am Yisrael. They stand there and they wait, and they can't wait. They see Moshe's not coming, so they right away need something else to hold on to, and they run from one thing to the other, and they're not able to hold on to what they already have. We know the word lishmor, we know it from Yaakov Avinu. When Yosef tells him the dream, it says that Yaakov Aviv shamar et hadavar. He heard the dream and he waited. And as Rashi says, he waited, he was patient, he remembered it, and he looked to see when it will be fulfilled. That's exactly what Am Yisrael need now. They need that shamar et hadavar. They need that ability to not only run and do and another and Matan Torah and this and Mishkan. They need that ability to hold on, to be still, to rest on Shabbos, and to hold on to what you already have, and to lishmor, and to hold on actively, la'asot et Shabbat, by holding on to that covenant, by holding on to that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's both a promise to that bond that will never disappear, and also instructions for us of how to hold on to that bond so we can continue and overcome all the challenges, such as the ones that are about to come upon us in the next psuk.
Very good, wonderful. I like it how you're connecting it to Chet HaEgel and all the way back to Yaakov Avinu, sheshamar et hadavar, that he was waiting to see when it will happen. He was actively waiting to see, because as you were saying, in our minds, when we think about shmirah, about guarding or saving or looking after Shabbos, in our minds, it's more on the concept of zachor and shamor. Zachor is the mitzvot aseh, shamor is the mitzvot lo taseh. Zachor is the active mitzvahs that you have to do, shamor are the mitzvahs that you prevent yourself from doing. However, over here, we see there's an active way to do this shmirah. There's an active way to, as we say, to keep Shabbos. How do you keep Shabbos actively? This is what these psukim are about, because like you were saying, Shabbos isn't only a commandment, it's probably the commandment that's mentioned the most times in the Torah, because it's a commandment with the covenant in it, a commandment for all of Am Yisrael together, a bond for all of Am Yisrael together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Shabbos is not only about preventing yourself from doing malacha. We actually discussed that last year in Parashat Vayakel. Over there there's a very strong emphasis on the concept of refraining from malacha, and we discussed the whole concept of what a malacha is. A malacha is not only doing work in order to get a salary, in order to get a payment so that you can buy things in this world. Malacha is a lot more than that. Malacha is your message to this world. We discussed that in last year's video. You might want to take a look at that one. But Shabbos really has many aspects to it. It has the aspect of not doing malacha, of refraining from doing malacha, of resting on Shabbos, as we say, but also keeping Shabbos, as we see in this week's Psukim, has an active side to it, la'asot. And when you say that you're refraining from something, you might leave a vacuum over there if you don't fill it up with something else. And a vacuum always gets filled up. So the question is, what do you fill in Shabbos with? Because if you're refraining from doing malacha, if you're stopping from doing malacha, then what do you put into Shabbos instead? How do you keep your Shabbos? What do you make out of your Shabbos? Does the Shabbos become about resting and not doing anything and just laying back on your back, as we say in Hebrew, batala, idleness or laziness, or just not doing anything? What do you fill in your Shabbos with? What do you do instead with the time you have? Of course, resting on Shabbos is important. It's even a mitzvah. Sheina b'Shabbat tanug. It's good to rest and sleep on Shabbos. However, you have a lot more time, and the question is, how do you fill it in? And this is exactly what Chazal say. Shabbos is meant for Torah. Shabbos is meant for reconnecting. And interestingly, like you said, the next pasuk right after this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving the luchos to Moshe, because this is what Shabbos is about: to regain, to accept these luchos again on Shabbos, to find the time to reconnect to the Torah again throughout Chazal, from the Yerushalmi, where Shabbos is meant for learning Torah, all the way to the Or HaChaim, to the Shulchan Aruch, to the Ramah. Shabbos is about learning Torah, is reconnecting to our source, reconnecting, recharging ourselves. Just like a cell phone needs to connect and recharge, so too we too need to reconnect and recharge ourselves. This is what Shabbos is meant for, because Shabbos is again refraining from doing actual physical labor, from doing work, but you have an entire message you have to bring into this world. Your malacha is your entire message, and part of that is also the Torah you have to bring into the world, the special message you as a Jew have to bring into the world. This is what keeping Shabbos means. This is what lishmor, la'asot Shabbos means. And this is maybe the very famous statement from the Hebrew literature, but also goes all the way back to the Piyutim, to Ibn Ezra, the famous saying that more than Am Yisrael kept the Shabbos kept and guaranteed Am Yisrael. Yoter mishi Yisrael shamru et Shabbat, HaShabbat shamra otam. Or as Ibn Ezra said, Ki yeshmera Shabbat, El yishmereni. This is what Shabbos is about, as the Piyut over there says, Ibn Ezra. So metzor chafetz, you shouldn't be talking about your melacha, divrei schora, ti'im betorat el, because what you have to do in Shabbos is talk about the Torah, is learn the Torah. This is what it means to keep the Shabbos. You can keep Shabbos by preventing yourself from doing malacha, by preventing yourself from doing actual labor, doing work, using muktzah or whatever, but that's only one aspect of Shabbos. That's what we discussed also in Parshat Vayakel last year. This week's Psukim, the emphasis in Veshamru Bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat. How do you keep Shabbos while doing it actively? That's through having an active Shabbos, through the Shabbos meals, through the Shabbos songs, through the Shabbos davening, and of course, on top of all, through learning Torah and reconnecting with the Torah during Shabbos.
You know, it's interesting you're talking about the different aspects of Shabbos, the learning, the food. We know Chazal referred to this as the term chetzio lachem vechetzio laHashem, and it's interesting because in our Psukim, we see both these aspects. At one point, Shabbos is called ki kodesh hi lachem, and even when it talks about the punishment, it says your punishment is karet from your nation, because you disconnected yourself from you, from your side of things. But then later on, it shows Kodesh LaHashem. So you have these two sides of Shabbos, the Kodesh Lachem and Kodesh LaHashem. And by the way, that's true for every bond. If Shabbos is keeping a certain bond, then there's two sides to it. There's the Kodesh LaHashem and Kodesh Lachem. And you mentioned we're already on our way towards Pesach. We're at the opening of the spring. And what does the Torah tell us? Ushmartem et Chodesh Aviv. And we all know very well that's not a very passive statement. There's a lot of active duties that come with the Lishmor et Aviv, whether it's, first of all, in the halachic sense of keeping the spring, of Chazal actively adding another month to the year to ensure that, and of course, everything that has to do with preparing for Pesach, which is a very active thing. Ushmartem et Chodesh Aviv, the Shmirah of Shabbat, this Shmirah that is so much more than just not doing something. It's taking something upon myself. It's constantly opening my eyes and seeing what I can do to strengthen strengthen that bond. That's the Shmirah of Shabbos, and that's why this is so central on these Psukim, which we say once or twice or 3 times, depends on your minhag, every single Shabbos.
Very good, very good. This bond between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the unbreakable bond that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the bond between us towards Hashem, but also between us to ourselves, as you were saying, the Shabbos that keeps us together, that keeps Am Yisrael so unique and so different together. This is what Shabbos is about. This is what Shabbos is here to remind us together with the learning of Torah, but we're out of time. We'll have to end here. Again, we'll just remind the viewers what we discussed the past couple of years. Last year we discussed the Psukim right after these Psukim where it says Moshe boshesh laredet et ahar. Moshe was boshesh. What is this boshesh? What is this word? What does it mean? What exactly happened over there when Moshe wasn't coming down from the mountain? We'll link that video. 2 years ago we talked about the actual Matan Torah, that happened after Chet HaEgel when Moshe got the Luchot, a very different Matan Torah that we know from Shavuos, from the Har Sinai that we always talk about. What exactly went on over there? We'll link those 2 videos. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, comment below on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet subscribed. Then Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and Hashem. We'll talk again next week.